your experience and what you've learned and all the relationships that you've had with farming families, what excites you about this work that you're doing for farm families or with farm families?
Well, it's exciting, or it fills my cup, so to speak, Lydia, because I feel called to this, and this is the way God wired me. Because according to Strength Finders, my 5 strengths are communication, lifelong learning, positivity, always thinking things will work out, empathy, which is a huge um, gift or skill that you need to be able to walk alongside people and to sort of navigate their pain or sit with them in hard places, right? And the last one is called woo, which is winning others over. And I did write an article one time when I used to write The Gift of. So you can Google it on my blog. It's called The Gift of Contentment. And that's another story that's beautiful, because we have lots of conflict, Lydia, in our coaching experience between families who just can't get enough, right? And so there's greed, and there's entitlement, and there's fighting, and there's fear all around who's going to get what or how is this going to transition. And it's very sad, because people are not content with what they have been able to have capacity for. And that's the choice, or that's the way that that's the story they're telling themselves, that it is not enough, or that they don't have enough. Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine, Froese, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Hi there, folks. It's Elaine Froese, Farm Family Coach, coming to you today again. Same place, my farm in southwestern Manitoba. And as we're recording this at the beginning of May, it's official. It's May 1st, pinch and a poke for the first of the month, which is what our family does, just to sort of see if people are aware that the calendar has turned over, which in agriculture, it does all the time and really quickly, it seems. So today I'm happy to introduce you again to Lydia Carpenter, who manages our coaching practice here at Farm Family Coach. And Lydia also is a direct farm marketer, so she too is a farmer. And we're going to turn the tables a little bit today. We've called this podcast The Power of Stories in Transition. And recently, Lydia was interviewed by Country Guide magazine to talk about the power of story, but we're going to look at it from more than one angle. So welcome here, Lydia.
Thank you, Elaine. And it is May 1st and the grass is greening. So that's really nice. Yeah, so I thought that turn the tables, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I was thinking. And Elaine, you're often interviewing folks and there's like really interesting topics, really interesting conversation. And I thought on the power of story, maybe turning and asking you a few things. Um, One of the things that I was thinking about was we often talk about the power of a letter. So story can take a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's communication and sharing. It's listening to others. It's being able to communicate in different ways, maybe through writing, or through conversation and speaking to one another. But one thing that I found in my collection of books is this one here. I've got a lot of books. I love books, but this one was given to me years ago, and it's called Letters to a Young Farmer. It was put out by the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture. I have read some of the letters. I will admit I have not read them all, but I'm excited to dig into this.
Well, and you said earlier that Temple Grandin is one of the writers in there, so that would be interesting.
Yeah, there's some really wonderful pieces of writing in here. Temple Grandin has written in here, among others. And so I encourage folks, if you're interested in Letters to a Young Farmer. And then there was an organization in Canada that kind of did the opposite of that. It was younger farmers writing to the founders or elders or whomever. And so I've read a few of those too as well. I think it was Young Agrarians that did that. And a colleague of mine in Alberta, maybe he's listening to this, Ian Griebel, he wrote a really beautiful letter to older farmers. He lost his father at a young age, um, in his farming career anyway, and so there's some insight there. So anyway, I thought of asking you, Elaine, just kind of with that in mind, just your thoughts and some of your story, and maybe, what some of your insights are or would be to younger, I'll say younger. I'm 40, so I feel like I'm still young, but younger farmers or the next generation.
Well, technically, you're in your last year of being a young farmer because you've now turned 40. Um, so ask me the question again. What I would say to young farmers or what they've been asking me?
Yeah, I guess, like, well, pulling on what they've been asking you, but if you were gonna write a letter, what advice, and I know we're cost giving advice, but what advice or what insight would you share with young farmers, the next gen?
Well, lots of different things. And I know my son is extremely exhausted today. He's 36 years old. There's been over 20 semis a day coming to pick up seed here. One of his little children, Ruby, the middle one, age 6, has had sickness this week. So she woke dad up twice in the middle of the night. And young farmers are managing a lot now, Lydia. And we talked in an earlier podcast with Isabel Knight about the complexity of agriculture. And so things are a lot different now in 2025 than they were even 10 or 15 years ago. And young farmers are, if they're young farmers, they've made a commitment. They're passionate about agriculture. They want to do well, and they want to have the tools to be able to do that. And I'm just reflecting on a conversation I had with a 50-something-year-old dad who has many young farmers coming back to his farm. And I was challenging him about, are these young people educated? Because I really feel that it's important for them to get a good basis in farm business management, crop production, livestock handling, all the things that come to the professionalization of a farm. And also for our son Ian, what was beautiful about him getting his diploma in agriculture is he built in that experience a really great peer network. So he has his friend Walt Smith, who might be listening to this podcast. Hi, Walt. Walt's dad was the first man who gave me encouragement to build my first website. So Walt's dad passed at a young age, and Walt is a seed grower as well, like Ian. And they're a beautiful team together of friendship and encouragement, not only as friends, but also in business. So I really think it's important for young farmers not to think or feel they're doing this all alone, because they don't have to, and they can network with other peers and also mentor with other older farmers who aren't their fathers or their moms. And I really appreciate the fact that lifelong learning, I think, is really important no matter what age you are. And lifelong learning is one of my key strengths, according to Strength Finders. So I have a pretty high bias that way. I'm also wired for positivity. So I'm concerned about young farmers whose hope has been deferred. And I often quote the verse in Proverbs that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, because many young farmers have come back to the farm, are listening to this, and they're going, oh, Elaine, nothing's changing here. I've been here 8 years. I've been here 11 years, and I can't seem to get any traction on getting equity or ownership or even more of the management. And so I want young farmers not to lose hope, but I want them to get really strong internally about their own self-awareness and what they need, what they're good at and what they're not good at, and then to get the training or learning to improve the skills that they're already strong in, Lydia. So that's a pretty long answer, but it's pretty complicated too, because every young farmer's journey is different.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you mentioned, there's a lot to manage. For you, given where you're at now in your age and stage and in your career, like, what stands out for you? Like, what do you remember about being a younger farmer? Like, if you think back to when you were 30 or 40, like, what do you remember about that time?
Well, I just see all these trucks coming. So when Wes and we got married in 1981 in July 4th, Independence Day, which I always tease as an oxymoron for marriage, because of course you're becoming interdependent when you get married. Same month as Chuck and Di. We outlasted them by a long shot. Um, so we only lived in town for 3 months. His parents were really anxious and happy for us to move to the farm. So we moved to the farm 3 months into our marriage. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So I would literally answer the phone and run to find Wes to tell him who wanted to buy seed. So you can imagine how inefficient that was. And the bookkeeping, I remember, we had this yellow Hilroy scribbler, the little one, bright yellow, and on the front it said loans. So Lydia, we would track our amortization schedule loans in this little scribbler, and we found, I've kept it. I don't know where it is exactly right now, but it's floating around my office somewhere. And it's testimony to the power of the pencil, because we would just write stuff down. We say, oh, we're getting this one paid off. This is great. Oh, we're getting this one paid off. And so how we tracked our debt was interesting. But the other thing that was interesting is when we moved into this farmhouse, which actually Wes lived in when he was in grade 4. So this farmhouse was built in 1960. I'm standing in the room that was Wes's dad's office because he was also a pastor. So I have this beautiful room that I've added more bookshelves and things to. But my father-in-law used to use this room for counseling and doing all his pastoral work, which is interesting because it's not unlike the work that we do as coaches sometimes. So when we moved in, we had a couch where the stuffing was coming out of it. Don Rain, a man from our church, said, hey, you guys want my couch? Otherwise, I'll take it to the dump. Yes. Had Coke boxes, the wooden ones on the as end tables that were covered in brown towels. And I come from a Scottish-Irish family. I married a Mennonite. People will say, ooh, lots of frugality and simplistic living. But what I'm trying to say is that as young farmers, our goals were very much aligned. We wanted to invest money, Lydia, in a tractor, which Wes did. We bought land early for less than $67,000 a quarter, which sounds like borscht now when those are the same quarters that are $500,000. So we were very astute financially, and we were financially aligned on what was important to spend our money on. And in the early days, I had an off-farm job as an extension home economist. And if I remember correctly, I think my salary was 29 grand a year. And my rent before I got married was $100 a month, and my food bill was $25. Can you imagine? You just cannot imagine. I got married with $19,000 in the bank at a 19% interest rate. Like those were wild times, right? When if you're on the saving side, it was great. But if you're on Wes's side, when you're buying a new tractor, I think it was a 4020 John Deere, that's, the banker said, oh, Wes, I can give you more. And he said, no, I don't want more. I just need to buy a tractor. So you fast forward that now 43, 44 years to where we're at now. There's just so many more numbers and zeros, right, on the balance sheet. So as young farmers, we worked Monday to Saturday. Our family culture is not to work on Sunday. It never has been, and it won't be, because we're very clear about everybody needing to rest and have Sabbath and have family time. And still things were well provided for. And, Lydia, when I think about the years that we only broke even, there weren't that many years where that was the case. So we're very fortunate to always be profitable, even if it was only a little bit profitable. But the other part is young families today, the common denominator is off-farm income, and they're exhausted and they're fighting for daycare. This family you and I visited with in another province, where she was very isolated and had a special needs son and was fighting to build a local daycare just to be able to manage her life, right? So as my children were born and as we adopted Ian, because I had a very severe case of postpartum depression, which is another story of insight, I lost most of 1984 to a psych ward, 9 months of being in group therapy and having 23 shock treatments until I became an outpatient at the end of that year. My in-laws actually moved into this house to help a newborn baby with Wes and for Wes to be a farmer. So that was an interesting learning curve too. And I think what that experience gave me was a lot of empathy and capacity to just not be really clear or sure that things are always going to be hunky-dory, and health issues can really take everyone for a sideswipe. And it's really good to have great relationships with your in-laws and to ask for help, because you're going to need it, right? At all those different stages. So we are very, very thankful that, we still live, I think, a fairly Practical, pragmatic life. We spend $75,000 a year on living, and I know this to be true because it all goes into QuickBooks. I don't do that because I'm not a detail person. I'm not a keeper, but it's helped me also just use my own story and our journey with Wes and Ian being our successor and Erica, our daughter, having a different life. Help people know that, hey, I'm doing the same kind of transition kind your parents are. And so, we're walking the talk. We've got tax specialists that come and sit in our couch in July. We've had a farm family coach, Peter Manis, who's a wonderful farm management specialist from Brandon, is with MNP, who asks hard questions. And so we are very grateful for the opportunity that we've been given. And now I've got 5 meal buckets lined up tonight, my Rubbermaid tubs to feed 6 men. So Mike, Graham, Harrison, Ian, Wes, and Rich are getting ribs and roasted potatoes for supper tonight because I'm on meal duty tonight, and I share that alternately with my daughter-in-law. And my support as a farm partner is mostly helping with the income stream and for family living and being a support to keeping things rolling. And I could get a phone call in the middle of this podcast saying, "Hey, Mom, when you're free, can you come jockey me to another field?" So that's how my role is evolved now. And also for childcare, because yesterday I spent the day playing with Ruby and Reed in the sandbox, getting wet and chalking on the driveway and barbecuing hamburgers and just doing the things that grandmas do to keep the kids safe while everybody else is busy getting the fields ready.
And yeah, you spoke to a lot of different elements, Elaine, of just being human and being on a farm. And I it just had me thinking, like, even so, like, yeah, you were a young farmer, you're a founder. Your story, even on the practical side of like how you got it done, right, is really powerful. And also the vulnerability of very difficult times is really powerful. And I I just think it's so important, and for founders in this case too, to be able to share their story with their next gen, because times have changed, things are different, perspectives are different. And even in that conversation, I mean, we covered, like, yeah, childcare, income streams, housing, ownership, like how do you actually create some security? And then we talked, meals, and so it is May 1st. So your folks are out seeding, correct? And my people are out calving. Um, and it's like there's story in story, right? It's like we're in it, it's evolving. Um, Years have passed, and so there's a lot of insight there to share. Um, Given what you know, and when I say what you know, like what you've experienced working with farm families across Canada and the US and other places. I know you've been to the UK, and we've talked to farmers in Australia and New Zealand, but given what you've experienced, um, and some of the changes that you see in agriculture, what do you hope for farm families, like for family businesses?
Well, first off, I hope that they cherish their families because what we see with the new generations, Ian was born in 88, so he's technically a millennial. Erica was born in 84. Um, these new farm families, I think, are very clear, Lydia, the new generations, that they also have to prioritize and take care and cherish their families, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I'm very proud of my son and daughter-in-law and how they have taken away screen time and how they are very aware of the cultural pressures of what co-parenting looks like in 2025. So it's much different, and there's a lot more things coming at families externally too. So that's really important to me. That, and it hits a nerve for me too because my family of origin is highly fragmented, and that makes me sad. But that's not something in my power to change because I am the eldest child and have the skills of communication and conflict resolution and mediation, all these good things, but I can't make other people behave the way I want them to behave. So that makes me sad when I see going forward that there, what you and I have experienced, I think, over the last 5 years of coaching, which never came into the conversation. Lots more talk now about estrangement. about people getting so angry and not being able to resolve conflict that they just shut off or cut the family tree branch totally off. And then those branches cannot be grafted on again. They are cut off. And the amount of times that I've given out the PDFs on Rules of Estrangement by Josh Coleman and Fault Lines or How to Heal Fragmented Families is sad to me because, again, I'm very clear that when I die and I pass, I'm not taking anything with me except richness of relationship to my family and friends and community, and hopefully a rich relationship towards God. That's been sort of the underlying story for me is in good times and in bad. Um, I'm always taken care of and deeply loved. And we all have a need for intimacy, which in my Hudson coaching training is to love and be loved. And that then speaks to the culture of the farm business, which Wes and I have been aligned on right from the beginning, is that this will be a safe place. It will be a positive place. It will be respectful. Women and men will both be respected for the skills they bring to the table. And there will be no bad behavior that is accepted. So that has also formed a story for a lot of my speaking, because that's what I want to see and practice in my own backyard, literally. So I don't know what else you want to ask around that, but I just, young families, young farmers today, besides all this complexity in agriculture, I really want them to know how to have better conversations, Lydia, because the pressure of the dopamine and their addiction to cell phones is a real thing. I mean, I sit here at my office window. I can see every semi-driver coming onto my yard. I can see the ones who are texting while they're about to drive around a blind corner of my house. And I can see the rants on social media about, I married my husband, I didn't marry the farm, which is another conundrum we have, because you and I would separate the family circle from the farm business. That's what we do as coaches, because we're systems people and we look at different systems and which ones are in good shape and which ones aren't. But unfortunately, a lot of young people don't understand how to tear that apart and deal with the professionalization of the farm and also deal with conflict. And so I think one of the things that I'm proud of in our practice is the tools that we have to practically help people understand that conflict is not to be avoided. And I use Ian and Kendra, my son and daughter-in-law, as an example when they were kind of really upset with me that I took care of somebody else's children. I said, whoa, stop. And I ran home, which is only 159 steps from their back door, picked up my laptop, which we're working on right now. And I said, look, I'll be back and we'll put it in my Google Calendar, because again, we make assumptions about what other people are needing and tell ourselves these stories. And that's why we're talking about story today, because Brene Brown has this classic line, what is the story you're telling yourself? And one of the beautiful things that you've said in our practice is we hold everyone in our coaching practice in high positive regard, which means we always think the best of people, no matter how hard their situations have been. Right. So with my daughter-in-law, she's in a hard place because her mother-in-law wrote the book called Farming's In-Law Factor. And so the most powerful thing I can say to her is, are you okay? How are you doing? And if something's off, I can say, okay, what do you want me to do differently? And that's not an affront to her or me. It's just clarifying the communication, because that to me is the foundation that families need. And many young farmers, unfortunately, are not good at doing conflict because they haven't had to or been taught. And they also are shying away from conversation because they tend to put their head down and their thumbs on their phone rather than picking them up and using them as a phone, or better yet, walking across the yard to have an actual face-to-face conversation.
Mhm. Yeah. Elaine, you mentioned a couple of different things. I'm just going to just highlight here. And one is kind of this like concept of like being present, right? Like that what you're seeing is this maybe people are not as present. The other thing that you mentioned is that you learned these skills, that you took it upon yourself at some point, and we can go back, I don't know, it was 20 years ago, or like to
Uh,
start
2003. So it's been 22 years ago since I graduated as a Hudson Institute coach, which was life changing, and also with my conflict resolution and mediation degree from mediation skills.
Yeah, so and I think that's just you're a lifelong learner, and I think it's also encouragement to those that are listening that for you and even for me, we learned these skills uh through education and programs and things that were available to us. Even some of the questions that I'm asking you now, I don't know if people have picked up on it, but and you said it, you said, what do you want me to do differently? But they're like what questions, right? And so I would even, I mean, and I'm thinking about it now, but even if folks want to rewind at some point or go back in this and just listen to the questions and ask your next gen open-ended questions or ask your founders, like, what was it like when you were 30 years old? Or what was it like when you started farming? What was it like? We often ask, what was it like to buy your first piece of land? Right? Can people remember what that was like? Um, and I started farming when I was in my early 20s, and now I'm 40. I think we mentioned that. And I find that I sometimes forget, like I don't take time to think or be present in those stories. Like, what was it like when we were able to, yeah, secure and secure our first piece of land? Really, that was about autonomy and affiliation for us, and like knowing that we had a place in agriculture, that we were secure in our living situation, and so it meant a lot. I do remember what that was like. Um, and I intend to be as present as I can or as conscientious as I can and kind of trying to remember that feeling. I appreciate just what you're saying, Elaine, about like learning these skills and like coming from a far origin that I think the word you use is fractured or fragmented, family of origin. Um, Fragmented, yeah. And yeah, and so I just kind of want to explore. I think we have a little bit more time. Um, Maybe when you think about, you know, your experience and what you've learned and all the relationships that you've had with farming families, what excites you about this work that you're doing for farm families or with farm families?
Well, I just, it's exciting, or it fills my cup, so to speak, Lydia, because I feel called to this, and this is the way God wired me. Because according to Strength Finders, my 5 strengths are communication, lifelong learning, positivity, always thinking things will work out, empathy, which is a huge um, gift or skill that you need to be able to walk alongside people and to sort of navigate their pain or sit with them in hard places, right? And the last one is called woo, which is winning others over. So to me, it's fun to be standing here talking to you from my office to your office, and we live 40 minutes apart from each other. But I just got off the mic earlier, just before this podcast, with the president of the Illinois Farm Bureau, and he's in his 60s, and his next director is in his mid 30s. And that's what excites me, is the ability to share ideas, but practical tools to help farm families have the life and the relationships they've always wanted. And people ask me, well, when are you going to stop doing this? And that's an interesting question too. And that's another story, because I don't think retirement is a Christian principle, but I do need to pull back. And I already have transferred my writing deadlines to you and the rest of the coaching team and Gray News. So that's a good thing. Um, Wes, my husband, is 68. He has a grandson and a granddaughter and another granddaughter who are 6. Today they are 5, 6, and 7. So you can imagine how close these kids are in age. And they're just the joy of our life because they live right next door. But he also then sees legacy for the future. And so um, I just feel that I want to keep helping farm families see that they have huge amount of choice. And that's what we learn in coaching, is that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. So people have the opportunity. And so for anyone listening to this podcast who's feeling trapped or disengaged or stuck, I can see the cycle of renewal from Hudson in my head. And I'm going, well, what are you going to do to take on something new? What are you going to let go of? And what are you going to move on? And these are all the tools that we've embodied as coaches to say you have options. It's going to be okay. And I'm going through a health journey right now that has been a huge surprise to me because no one in my family has cancer. And I've been weighing out, how many people do I tell? But it's just like my postpartum depression. I had the worst case of postpartum depression my psychiatrist had ever seen in 21 years of practice. But because I went through that depression, Lydia, I have great empathy for people who are suffering from anxiety, panic attacks, depression, all kinds of things, right? Because we want wellness in agriculture. And that's why I'm a big supporter of Do More Ag Foundation and also the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance. So I am now in a stage where my health is in the pain of not knowing. And we talk about, grabbing the bull by the horns and talking about hard things. So my hard thing is how to navigate a diagnosis of having leukemia, which is chronic, which may be okay. And I may have 5 years left, or I may have 10 or 15 or more, but I don't know that. And the reason I'm talking about it and sharing story with you today is because everybody is navigating something. And there's a saying, be kind to everyone you meet. You have no idea what battles they are facing. And it just makes it richer for my story to think about making sure all my affairs are in order, which again is the Because I Love You list, planning your funerals. I have an invoice here on my desk for buying burial plots. It's right here. And who knew? They're not $120 each anymore. They're $750 each. So I have work to do as well. But this is not the end of the story, right? This is the journey that we're on. So let's encourage each other.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. I think you kind of, you brought it full circle there as well. And there's an excerpt from this book actually that I'll read. It's one of the last letters, and it's from Masumoto, who farms, and they write, "Finally, I believe that it's only when you grow older that a change transpires. Maybe it's because you physically slow down, or your perception of success changes, or you accept your position in life. You may be more content with what you have instead of what you don't possess."
And contentment with godliness is great gain.
Yeah.
And I did write an article one time when I used to write The Gift of. So you can Google it on my blog. It's called The Gift of Contentment. And that's another story that's beautiful because we have lots of conflict, Lydia, in our coaching experience between families who just can't get enough, right? And so there's greed and there's entitlement and there's fighting and there's fear all around who's going to get what or how is this going to transition. And it's very sad because people are not content with what they have been able to have capacity for. And that's the choice, or that's the way that that's the story they're telling themselves, that it is not enough or that they don't have enough. So
Yeah, thanks, Elaine.
next.
Yeah, I just thank you very much, and thanks to the listeners. I'm not a professional interviewer, so thanks for indulging.
Oh, but you're a good question asker because that's what coaches do.
Yes, it's true. But yeah, and so it's the power of story. So thank you for sharing, Elaine. It is May. It is seeding time. Of course, it's calving for folks, and I just thank you for mentioning Do More Ag and some of the other resources that are available to folks as far as mental health resources. If anyone's listening and you didn't catch that, we'll put some of these in the show notes as well. And so just as we finish off, Elaine, just is there a book you're reading, or a thought, or a resource, or a quote, or a word that you'd like to leave the listeners with as we close?
Well, every year I pick a word for the year, and I know that one of my words recently was flourish. But I think my word for 2025 was wisdom. And that's an interesting word because when I choose them at the beginning of the year, I'm not quite sure why I chose the word I do. And I know many of you know the Serenity Prayer about God grant us the change or the wisdom to know what we can change and what we can't. And so I just would really encourage listeners to have a heart to heart with themselves and think about what is it that in your heart of hearts that you need to do, but that you're avoiding doing, and just start taking the next step because your family's waiting for you. That would be a good thing. So thanks for joining us, folks. We flipped the tables around for you just for something different here. Lydia and I have lots of interesting conversations. We both like a lot of the same things, really good food, really good tea. And we are hopeful that something in our conversation has spurred you in a different direction to help you on your journey. And would also like to remind you to sign up for the wait list for the membership site, which is every Tuesday, a couple of Tuesday mornings and one Tuesday evening every month. We do some group coaching through our membership site, and we'll be opening up the card again in October. So take care of yourselves, be well, hug each other, appreciate each other, and have a cup of tea or coffee and share your story because other people need to know where you're coming from. Bye for now. Hey, farm families, are tough conversations about transition keeping you up at night? I'm Elaine Froese, Farm Family Coach. My Farm Family Transition membership will give you monthly tools, coaching, and real life support to finally move your farm transition forward with less stress and a whole lot more clarity. It's time for you to stop circling the same old conversations and start creating harmony in your family and in your farm's future. So join us today at elainefraise.com/membership, where your legacy will take root. Let's make transition less tough and way more doable.